Alright, so Japan, the west of the east. They're east, they're far east in the world map. If you're looking at Eurocentric point of view, center of the world, then they're east. But they're also influenced a lot by the west, which is, the west has influenced the whole world, but in the east, the Chinese were kind of colonized in small part by the British because the British were, all over the world. I believe they also the Portuguese or something, or the Spanish, some other city. They have like a few port cities that got stolen from them or basically colonized by the West. But Japan is different because they've never been colonized. They've been reclusive, actually, and then they eventually opened up to the West. The Dutch was the first ones that actually were allowed to, uh, trade with them, and they started learning, our sciences and technologies and Western things. They started learning.
Freaking liar.
We need your help. We've received reports that a European is wandering around in disguise. Have you seen anybody like that?
Huh? A real European? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I haven't seen anybody like that around here.
But also, the Portuguese as well. That's why, if you know Spanish, you probably know this word right here. Because it's the same word. Pan. 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 Bread. The Portuguese introduced bread to the Japanese because it's a Western thing, right? They had rice in the East, and the West had wheat, right? And so we introduced bread to them, and it was the Portuguese who introduced bread to them. So they just used the Portuguese word for bread, which is also the same as the Spanish word. And then America shows up and kind of destroys a few cities, and then we help them rebuild. We show them how capitalism works, how to run their economy, basically. They model their economy and their government system basically after ours. And they start doing very, very well economically. That's why Japan is the third largest economy in the world right now, because they modeled themselves after Americans. We showed them how to run their economy. But despite this, despite the fact that we've intervened, basically the West has intervened in their affairs, unlike China, we didn't colonize Japan, no Western country, and so they've remained collectivist, right? A collectivist society, to where they're all basically homogenous. Basically, the Japan is like what 95% pure ethnic Japanese. They don't like foreigners, right? Gaijin, baka da gaijin desu. They don't like foreigners, especially, might sound racist, but they don't like dark-skinned people very much either. Um, us, us whiteys, they are kind of fine with, because, we're similar in complexion to them. They're, a little bit darker than us white people, but very, tan brown people and black people, they don't like them. They're a little bit afraid of them. I wouldn't want to say afraid, but they're very skeptical and mistrusting of them. They're also mistrusting of any gaijin, but they seem to trust white people like more than other races. And also, of course, if you're another East Asian race, then they'll be more trusting of you. Unless you're Chinese, they don't like the Chinese and the Japanese do not like each other at all because the history of them warring, and so they don't like each other. They like the Japanese and the Koreans are the ones that actually really get along. The South Koreans, anyway. Japan is very afraid of North Korea, and that's why we have our base there. We have our base there to keep an eye on China. We have our base in South Korea. We have our base in Okinawa, Japan, to kind of keep an eye out on that part of the world. And also, we've told Japan, just like Germany, we did the same thing to Germany where we told them, you can't have a military. You've done some shit, so you can't have a military. And that started World War II, basically. And we did, after World War II, we did the same thing to Japan. We told Japan, okay, you can't have an army anymore. We're going to protect you. And that's why we set up a military base in Okinawa. Because we wanted military presence, and we also wanted to defang them, so that they wouldn't, want to take over more shit, basically. Because in World War II, they were taking over China, and like a lot of the Pacific islands around Japan in the Pacific. But their cultures remained relatively similar throughout, thousands of years. They're very in touch with their culture, which is something that the West has lost. Like, all of the West, America, Europe. That's why Japan doesn't like multiculturalism. Japan is very afraid of multiculturalism because whenever you introduce multiple cultures into your culture gets kind of drowned out, right? And that's what's happened in America and Europe, basically, is that we've allowed people to, like, practice their own culture instead of, insisting that that foreigners that move to your country, instead of insisting that we have them assimilate into our culture, right, which is adopt our culture, we tell foreigners that it's okay to keep your own culture, practice your own culture here. But that's not how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to assimilate. You're supposed to adopt the culture of where you're moving to, if you're going to be living there permanently, right? Which is why the Japanese don't like foreigners. They don't want people practicing their own culture in their culture. They want you to respect their culture and learn their culture, right? They don't want to have to learn your culture and adopt your culture because you're living in their country, right? And that's one thing I really respect about Japan, is that they stand up and they really don't want to adopt multiculturalism, and they also don't want to import a lot of foreign workers. They're going to have to. It's inevitable, because their population pyramid is inverted, right? There's a lot of old people and very little young people, right? It's the population pyramid goes down. There's less young people and a lot of old people, and so they don't have a lot of people to work, and so they have to import foreigners. But they're going to have high skilled workers, basically, instead of, low skilled workers. They want people with actual degrees, because that's one of the qualifications to get a work visa in Japan, is you actually have to have some type of college certificate or college degree. You can even just go online and print a fake degree. They don't even check, but you have to have some kind of air of legitimacy, right? And because if you're not even smart enough to go online and fake having a degree, then they're not even gonna fucking look at you. They're just gonna deny your work visa. In short, Japan has been influenced by the West, but they still retain their own culture, their own individuality, even though they're a collectivist society and they don't value individuality. It's kind of weird. They encourage you to be yourself, but yourself within the parameters of society, right? Don't go outside the bounds of society. And I guess we're kind of that way too, but we're a little bit more lax on everything that you can do, what you can do as an individual. But in short, that is, Japanese society. They're influenced by the West, but they've still maintained their own culture. They're influenced by us. We've taught them how to do things, how to run their society a little bit better economically, and they've adopted some of our customs as well, our culture, a little bit of it, but they've still highly maintained their own culture, and it's because of the homogeny of their society. It's still, like I said, about 95% Japanese. I don't know the exact number, but it's still very, very high ethnic Japanese. And they don't want foreigners coming in there with their own culture and imposing on them. They get very pissed off at people that try to impose their culture on Japanese culture, because culture clash, right? And they're very collectivist. They're like hive mind mentality. They'll band together, right, and tell you, no, you need to do it our way, because you're in their country. So respect their culture when you're there. I guess that's it. I guess that's about all.